All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to look at an analysis that sees the fall of Odessa as something much bigger than just another battle. It frames it as a potential turning point, not just for Ukraine, but for the entire global order.
And the whole idea here, the main argument from our sources, is that what's happening isn't some random sudden event. No, it's the result of these deep underlying forces that have been building up for years. Think of it less like a lightning strike and more like the final, predictable break of a system that's been under incredible pressure.
So what do we actually mean by a structural collapse? Let's unpack that first, and then we'll see why the loss of a single city could be such a massive red flag for the whole system.
The sources use a great analogy for this. It's like a dam that's had cracks spreading across its surface for years. The final collapse isn't a surprise, right? It's that one moment where all those little weaknesses, military exhaustion, political cracks, dwindling support, they all give way at the exact same time. It's the point where things start breaking down faster than they can possibly be fixed.
And that gets to something really crucial here: manpower exhaustion. You see, a surrender on this scale isn't just a tactical move. It's a powerful signal that the soldiers on the ground have hit their absolute physical and psychological limits. They've done the math and realized that holding the line just isn't possible anymore.
So that idea of a breaking point, that brings us right to our next section. We're going to focus on why Odessa, this one specific city, is seen as the absolute strategic center of gravity in this whole conflict.
Think of Odessa as Ukraine's economic lung. It's the main gateway to the Black Sea, and through that, to global trade. So this isn't just about a piece of land on a map. It's about the very viability of the country. Control over this port pretty much decides whether Ukraine can even function as a self-sufficient state.
In this slide, it really breaks down what that means. Losing access to the sea fundamentally changes a country. It goes from being a sovereign actor, in control of its own destiny, to what the sources call a managed space. Basically, a state that's forever dependent on handouts from sponsors. This one thing, sea access, shifts the entire game from battlefield tactics to long-term economic survival.
Okay, so if Odessa is that important, why did so many narratives seem to miss the possibility of its collapse? Well, this gets us to a really key part of the analysis. You have to look past the popular stories and dig down to the hard, structural realities that are actually driving the outcome.
This is really the heart of the argument right here. On one side, you have the things we hear a lot about: courage, morale, advanced weapons. And those things are absolutely real and important. But on the other side, you have these slower, grinding forces: population size, industrial capacity, and just plain old geography. And in a long, drawn-out war of attrition, the sources argue that those are the things that ultimately become decisive.
Let's take this number, 3-1. According to the sources, that's roughly Russia's population advantage. In a long war, the ability to replace your losses, not just soldiers, but factory workers, engineers, you name it, becomes absolutely critical. That demographic depth gives Russia a margin for error that Ukraine just doesn't have.
All right, what about the sanctions? That was a huge part of the initial Western strategy. Weren't they supposed to cripple Russia's economy? Let's look at the data the sources present.
Well, what the analysis shows is this huge gap between what was predicted and what actually happened. Everyone expected a total economic collapse, but the reality was far different. The Russian economy proved way more resilient, adapting by shifting its trade and putting its own domestic economy on a war footing. The knockout blow just never landed. And it's not just the GDP numbers. Take a look at industrial capacity. Modern wars of attrition are basically giant production contests. And this chart shows a pretty stark advantage for Russia when it comes to making things like artillery shells, which, as you know, have a massive impact on the battlefield every single day.
So this mismatch in industrial power and economic strength, it doesn't stop at the front lines. As the analysis explains, the effects have the potential to ripple out and shake up the entire international system.
The idea here is that one event could set off a chain reaction. First, it raises questions about U.S. credibility and whether its support can truly guarantee an outcome. That, in turn, tests the unity of alliances like NATO. And all the while, non-Western countries start thinking, maybe we should diversify our options, which just speeds up the shift away from a world dominated by a single power.
So, where does this all lead? The analysis lays out a few possible futures. They go from a negotiated, frozen conflict all the way to worst-case scenarios like uncontrolled escalation. But the most probable outcome, according to this analysis, is something called a messy stalemate, where the original goals are abandoned, but there's no clear victory or defeat for anyone.
At the end of the day, the takeaway from the sources is this. This was never just about Ukraine. It's a massive warning about the limits of economic power, the critical importance of industrial strength, and the real dangers of overreaching. It suggests that hard realities like geography, resources, and just plain endurance often shape history more than anything else.
And that's the question we'll leave you with. It's a final thought from the analysis that really sums up the core theme we've been exploring. What happens when our assumptions about how the world should work collide with the hard structural realities of how it actually does?